welcome to Law Moms Lounge on a Friday. I'm Kate Lincoln Goldfinch,
I'm Hannah Hembry Bell.
and we are Law
Law
Moms Out
Moms
Loud.
Out Loud. Woohoo! I love how it
Normally,
feels
we've
dance
got,
when you say
well, the music is so dancey. Um, we usually have guests, and we started this new lounge in between guests where we just visit with y'all and talk about the things that are on our minds and our hearts and the books we're reading and all of that jazz. So, as per the usual, thanks for being here, and feel free to drop your comments and your thoughts and your questions for those who are with us live, because we love an interactive show. How you doing today, Hannah?
Oh, I'm doing good. I mean, the big like, and we've talked about the show, and we're interested on y'all's thoughts. But I think for Law Moms Lounge, we're just kind of showing up in the space Kate and I are both in this week, and hope y'all do the same. Maybe with some topic in mind. In general, this week I think that's back to school, and our take on back to school is a little bit different. We're not going to tell you how to like cut jellyfish into your kids' peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something.
Jellyfish.
That this is not that. So if you're looking for like crafty ways to win Pinterest, we are not your Huckleberry for that. We're just talking some stuff about back to school, and what's on our minds and our hearts. And so we'll talk a little bit about back to school, talk about what we're reading, talk about our dominant thoughts this week, and then do our gold stars at the end. So I thought it might be interesting and fun, Kate, to share our probably very different approaches to school in life, our back to school thing. So, like for you, whenever you were growing up in elementary, high school, college, what was back to school? What did that mean for you? How did that feel to you back then? Even law school, I guess. Yeah.
Um, it's very different. One of the things that I've noticed between me and my kids is there was so much for me excitement about items, about my back to school wardrobe. I would like get the whatever the magazines are, what are those called that have clothes, and I'd like
Catalogs.
catalogs, and I'd like circle my outfits. And I remember one time I picked my outfits so early that by the time I got my back to school budget, I was already like sick of those clothes, even though I hadn't even had them. So, but like I had back to school clothes, back to school supplies was the best. And just like my new backpack. And I was just very excited about the change in season. And one of the things that just maybe it's my kids, maybe it's a generational difference, but like everything just sort of rolls into the next a lot more now in my family with my children, and they don't have a back to school wardrobe. They don't even care about one. I've offered multiple times to take them both shopping, and it's like, meh, I don't really want to do that. They're not that interested in the school supplies. So I don't know what that's about. I'm wondering if it's been like that for you too.
Yeah, I think it's different. I think, my back to school, I always liked school. I mean, there'd be parts like, oh, well, school, I don't want to do homework and stuff. But school, I was a very like front, I've always been a very front row student. In law school, they call it a gunner. I like to think I was like kind of a cool, nice gunner. I wasn't like trying
Yeah.
to be such a know-it-all all the time. Although some people from school watching this might be like, Hannah, oh my God. Um, but I like the routine of it. I like being in a school. Like there was a point when I first went to college, I was going to be a teacher. And there's been different points, especially early on and being a working person, where I thought about being a teacher. Like the idea of this cycle, I like the new start feeling of back to school. And one of the things that Gretchen Rubin says is, or something like this, probably not exactly how she says it, but a new start's a good time for a new start. And that when it's back to school time, it's like, okay, new me, new year or something back then, even for me. And I enjoyed that part, the newness of it, a fresh, like I love New Year's is my favorite. The January 1st is my favorite thing, right? Okay, here we go. So that feeling for me, I definitely did a very distinct back to school shopping clothes. If my mom's watching this, she's gonna remember those days. Very get the new my satchel, my backpack, and my pencils, and all that. And I enjoyed that. I think one thing that's different in terms of stuff is it probably exposes a little bit of how our kids get a lot of stuff through the year. So that big back to school push wasn't like a, hey, it's kind of now or never. This is your one big thing. And then maybe you'll get some clothes for Christmas, right? That's mostly how it was for us. Like you'd get your back to school clothes and then you'd get clothes at Christmas, but you didn't really like go shopping or get new stuff in between. So I think it felt more of a big deal when we get summer clothes too. So that sort of part, maybe it just shows that we've spoiled our kids or something. Mine they wanted back to school stuff. Like, hey, it's back to school. I need my new tennis shoes, some outfits. More of the boys, just timing wise for my daughter, we didn't have time with her kind of schedule to do a big shopping thing, and she's kind of into the thrifting thing. So it's more of a process than just like one big um, shopping thing. So I think the back to school for me growing up meant more about the newness of it, the new routine, and having some place to go all the time. I enjoyed that part, even if I don't know if I enjoyed it at the time, but in hindsight, that's what I think it was. Um,
Well, your daughter did get a pretty fun new look, maybe if not the
oh
clothes.
gosh, yes. Well, I guess that's a good point for back to school for my daughter. She now has very, very, very cool pink hair. And that's just, I mean, because one of the things we're going to talk about is how different it is, I guess, with, and just being a parent, I have to tell you, is because I joked, I texted you, Kate, about doing the pink hair thing, and like, because I guess I'm this mom now who's like, okay, we need a back to school pink hairdo and maybe a piercing. I mean, all right. Okay, I'm just a yes on things that don't need to be no. That's kind of my
Mhm.
approach with it. And I think one of the things that surprises me is that, like in Van, Texas, I don't even think I don't know if it's still the rules, but you certainly could not have showed up to school with pink hair. That was not have been allowed in the dress code. And Austin, where we live, is very like you do you, boo. I mean, about clothing. I think the rules are just like your special parts have to be covered. I deduced that as the rule just by what is walking into school at the junior high and the middle school where we do drop off. Um, so yeah, maybe that's part. Like I didn't. I think now kids. My deduction, because my kids. So let's a little context. My kids are 10th grade, 8th grade, 7th grade, and the baby. And Kate, what grade for you? So everybody knows who we're talking about.
I've got a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'll talk a little bit about the 10-year-old. I can do it now. Their school, they're non-binary. Their school does not have grade levels. So we made the decision last year to put our older child in a democratic free school environment, which has been really perfect for this particular child. And I'm learning a lot. In fact, it's what I'm reading right now about this model and our system of schooling and the history of schooling and how it came about just in humanity. And it was about indoctrinating children into religion and in some cases getting them out of the fields and getting them out of the factories. And it was about establishing obedience and indoctrination. And um, I mean, it's sort of a big, long topic, but this is a particular child who does not do well in a very structured, controlled environment. I think a lot of kids actually are this way. And so that our older kid is in this like very radical free school, which is a super duper parental leap of faith. I
Because
have,
wait, Kate, talk about that for a second because I think one of the things we both offline have realized is like doing school and parenting in kids in school is this is a very like mom focused show, I guess. Um, it in school is different than we thought because whenever we first talked about the potential to change the school, like number one, to me that's a pretty foreign concept that now kids, at least in Texas at this time in history, have a lot of choices. Not just public, private, but even within public in Austin, you can go to different schools. You can do transfers. There's magnet schools. There's all kind of stuff. So that discretion. I'm from a little big town. You go to that school.
mm,
The end. That's it. So the choice that they have, and I think that's a little overwhelming sometimes. Like that there are options with school. Like I don't know. So for you, I remember Kate, whenever you were considering, hey, maybe we need a different school solution, your first thought was not, let's go to the, because I think sometimes people might think that, like, oh, of course, Kate would send her kids to this like very hippy dippy kind of a school situation. But it wasn't like that for you at first.
No, although I had toured this school back when my kid was like it was like early, and I went to the school and I just thought, this is even too far for me. And I think I am a radical thinker in terms of parenting, but there's a reason we don't have our younger child in the school. And for me, it's the literacy component. I think one thing that public school does quite well is literacy. There's an established structure for teaching kids how to read and write. And I mean, I don't know if that's the right decision or not. I mean, one of the things that I think that we should just acknowledge as parents, within all of these choices, it is really tough. Like, we have to make these choices as early as the first daycare. Are you going to do a nanny? Are you going to go back to work? Are you going to put your child in a daycare? How are you going to pick it? And then at each point you make a school decision, if you're honest with yourself, you know that you are changing the trajectory of your child's life in that decision. Who's going to teach them, who their friends are going to be, what their future is going to hold based on this one little fork in the road that you are in control of. And sometimes you can get yourself real freaked out and bogged down with these decisions. But, I mean, we do the best we can in the moment that we're in. You're so good about this, Hannah, just realizing this about yourself and other people. And so I've just made the best decision that I knew in the moment in so far the 10 years that I've had to make these choices. But I mean, this goes on in a life all the way until we help our kids pick college, if that's what they do. But for me, what happened in this particular transition was it happened mid-year in the school year last year. And, our kid was non-binary and was not thriving in this other structure, even though we live in East Austin. And so the administration was very accommodating with us. It wasn't anything. I mean, we loved the school that we were in, but it was like, okay, we need to make an environment change for our child. And so it was the impetus that I think we needed to just have faith in this new model. And it's been, I mean, in a way, it's like there's, this whole community of people out there in the world who do free school or unschool or democratic school or any version of this unstructured school where the children direct their learning. And for these people, there's books, there's academic studies, there's decades upon decades of knowledge and experience about why this model works. And to them, I am a baby, like I show up and I'm like, wow, and I could just see their sort of smile, like, oh, isn't that cute? You're asking, how's my kid going to get ready for college? And it's like, so to them, I'm just a newbie. But to me, I plan on talking about this more and more because I'm learning so much about, what doesn't work about our existing school system. And I know we all know something doesn't work for our kids in some way or another. But the thing that's really blowing my mind as I think about it right now is like, our school system was not established based on what's the best thing for children. Our school system is a carryover from historical establishment of indoctrination of children for religious principles. And so all of like the schedule of it, the everything of it, the hierarchy of it is just a carryover. And I don't know how much thought has really gone into what's the best thing for our kids. And actually, who really knows the answer to that question?
Yeah, and I think for me, the idea of unschool is a bridge farther than for me personally, am comfortable with at this moment, right? And so it's like, I think with that, with being a parent, man, it is, because it's not only which each decision you make, it does have the potential to impact the rest of their lives. But you can make yourself sick with that. You just make the best decision you can, given the information at the time, and let yourself off the hook because you did the best that you could do in that point. I think one thing to think about in terms of choice, Kate, just to acknowledge based on my experience and probably a lot of people who will see this video's experiences, you're so fortunate that you're in a Four Corners family and that you were able to just quickly adjust and make this decision with your partner based on what you thought was best for your child. Because for a lot of us who are not, that feeling in your heart of that your child needs something different comes with so much baggage and red tape when you have an ex-partner, ex-husband, wife, spouse, other parent, who you have to get their buy-in. And often people are not together anymore, do not agree, because reasonable minds can disagree, right? Unschool, if I was your ex-partner, we would have a conversation about unschool, right? And so for a lot of people like my clients, this is about the most stressful part, is making education related decisions, especially if one of the parents is difficult and just kind of says no sometimes to say no. And when you as one parent believe in your heart that something's best for your child and you can't do it without a very expensive lawsuit, and even if then, maybe not, that piece, like we do acknowledge, and Kate's always sensitive about this, but like hopefully that can give you, Kate, also just some gratitude, right? In that, that part is a real luxury that half of us don't have. And, I could talk a little bit more about how to navigate that, but I think in terms of the school piece of this is I've learned a lot. I mean, we could talk about what we've learned. Like I've learned a lot in parenting now, somebody all the way to 10th grade. And, I've done at this point, at least 6th grade 3 times and up through 6th grade 3 times. We're doing 7th grade for the 3rd time. And it's a good lesson in expectations. And one of those core secrets of adulthood, another Gretchen Rubin thing, is that it's when our expectations are not met that we experience disappointment and frustration. And I definitely had different expectations of how my parenting, especially, in this context, as it concerns school, would go. Like I expected all of my kids were going to be like front row, A+, little valedictorian sort of people like I was, right? That's how I expected it, with like gonna always try to get to the honors and AP classes, and I have to have 100. It's not even just an A isn't good enough. I need a 98 or above. I'm going to do through calculus. I want to get every scholarship, and I'm going to be involved in everything. I'm going to be on student council and play a sport and be a cheerleader and be in band and, everything, go to church all the time. So like I put on top of them my expectation based on who I was and my circumstances. And so there was a period where it felt, if I'm honest, I wasn't disappointed in them. Like, I don't mean that at all, but I did have to release this concept of the vision I had of how parenting school-age kids was going to go and the reality for me and for my kids. And once you do that, when you let go of that expectation, you release yourself from the disappointment and you can be present and enjoy what is versus just thinking about what it's not. And that allows people freedom and room to be who they are. And that's been my huge takeaway, is learning to allow the people we love, and particularly our children, to be who they are, and being really aware of when we're trying to make them be who we are or who we were or another one I think it's hard for people, who they wish they'd been. Like maybe you never did. Like I one of my ways would probably still be like languages, is really pressing my kids to take and get really good at languages and really forcing them to do speech. That's kind of my things, like speech and debate's the best thing I ever did in my life. My whole life changed because of one speech class in high school. And so, which I can tell that story if anybody's interested, but the changing and letting go of what we thought our life was going to be like and what we thought our kids were going to be like, and loving and accepting ours, not accepting like because it's less than, it's just different than. It's not less. There's not only one way to do school. And in my mind, truly, I thought there was, to be the best at it, right? And like very this. So that's been, I think, my biggest takeaway now that I've got one up in 10th grade. And you just kind of, I have a little bit of a live and let live approach. I don't know. The jury's out on whether that's the right move.
You've taught me so much about this, Hannah, as I have my angst because reality isn't meeting my expectations of parenting because I haven't entered any of the teenage years yet, but you're, solidly in them. And one of the things that I really thought about is you've helped me fast forward, not to say that I'm not going through the journey coming up, but I've been thinking a lot about like raising teenagers and how it seems like really like the decade between 10 and 20, when our kids are between the years of 10 and 20, it's like always hard, right? And a big part of the hardship for parents is like the slow letting go of control over the outcome. And this story that you actually do control the outcome, that your children are extensions of you. And what is partially so painful about raising teenagers is how long it takes us to get to that point. And so to the extent we can fast forward, I'll speak for myself, to the extent I can fast forward, I want to. It's like we're ripping off of the Band-Aid. And so I invite you to keep doing what you've been doing for me, Hannah, which is when I have those moments of like, oh, I wish it were this. You say, well, it ain't. And so you can either, be upset about it and spin your wheels wishing, or just like take it and move on. And that's really
Kate, I think
to life.
Look, I think that this is like one of the few silver linings of being divorced. And this is how I have this wisdom. It's not because like I literally came to it the hard way. I had to get it beat into me through experience. Is the idea that we control the outcomes of our children's lives is a total illusion. And that illusion is easier in a Four Corners family because you say you want to go to democratic free school, you can. You say you want to have purple lunch boxes and that's the rules for forever, you can. And when you aren't, and you're a fractured open, and it's not a fractured, I mean, some people do it well, bless them. It's an open system. Lots of different data can come in and out. And quickly you realize in the not standard Four Corner structure, you don't have control. These are just, the best way I've tried to say is like little sojourners. They're on their own journey. They're just passing through. They came to you, however you believe they made it. These little spirits made it to you, these little souls, whatever that means to you. You've got them for a pretty short period of time. And I don't let anybody guilt like my heart into you've got only 72 this much minutes, blah, blah. That is not helpful to me whatsoever. It makes me just like, ugh, like I don't need that kind of pressure. But you have them for this short period of time. They are just having their own little journey. They're going to have their own successes, their own failures, their own heartaches, their own lessons. They have to be well-rounded people. And school is one of the big ways that it doesn't. Sometimes just like really sucky things that happen, you have to welcome that, let them experience that when they're still in your home, and you can be supportive to them because that's how we get some grit. If it's just a fluff, you're going to just be a fluff puff. And I think that that's one of the ways probably that at least a teenager right now, and I have a wonderful daughter. So like that's part of it is I have not resisted losing control over her because I haven't had control over the situation since 2014 when I got divorced. And in fact, at one point I had 0% of control over the situation. I wasn't able to effectuate any change educationally. I wasn't able to know what was going on every single day at school, et cetera. So I had to kind of really take a back seat just because of the way things were back then. And it's not like that now, but I kept my lesson. And that is, they're just people going through their own thing. You're here to support and equip them to handle things well and make good decisions. And if, for me, that's why it's like, look, we try to keep the main thing and fight over and stand our ground on what matters and don't on what doesn't. So like, is pink hair my first choice? I do not have pink hair. I have on pink lipstick today, but not pink hair. But that's just not a no for me. It's just not worth that battle. So school is one way I think that it really comes up. So for all of you mamas out there, especially with littles who just obsess over every this, or like who's mad at who on the playground or whatever, my best advice is let the kids figure out how to handle that themselves. If there's not a physical safety danger or a real emotional danger going on, they got to learn. Let them learn. That's really what you want to happen. Think of all that you learned in that.
Yeah, I mean, as I hear you talk, Hannah, I've been thinking a lot about going back to school, and the biggest thing that I remember from my school years was being bullied. I was bullied really, really badly, particularly during a period in middle school. But even in my early years, I was an outsider. I grew up in Austin in an affluent neighborhood. We lived in a big chunk of the time in Tarrytown, but my parents did not have money. My mom just, was able to rent a house in this neighborhood. And it was the kind of neighborhood where, the brand of your clothes really mattered, and the kind of car that your parents picked you up in really mattered. And at the time, my mom was driving a beige 1979 Toyota Corona station wagon. You probably don't even know what a Corona is.
I'm like, what even is that?
It was a beater. And I just, I remember moments of being alone on the playground, like during recess, walking around by myself, thinking about being lonely. And then, I went to middle school. There was like an acute bullying incident. There was an incident on a school bus where I was sort of targeted, and some kids got in trouble. They got suspended. And then there was a big backlash about that by them and their parents. And that sort of like launched this fury of bullying against me, to the point where there were like signs in the hallways, like petitions about how much people hated me. And it was bad, bad, bad. And I can't imagine watching my children go through that. And it was really hard on me. And I've done a lot of therapy about it. But in retrospect, thinking about it, I wouldn't be who I am today. I probably wouldn't have picked the profession that I did, fighting for vulnerable outsiders. And I guess I've never had this thought before, but even that I'm glad for,
Well, that's the thing, Katie. It's like, you when we try to save our kids from that pain, we also save them from the lesson that comes from it. And imagine how much worse off the world would be if you didn't, and your mom wasn't able to help you survive that pain, be there for you in it, you experience it. And imagine how much worse the world would be if you didn't go through that. All the people that you've helped, all the people you continue to help and will help. And it's one of the pieces that makes you exactly who you are. And it was bad. Really bad things happen in this world. There's divorce, there's abuse. Like in our jobs, we see bad stuff. So you have to trust, and I think it gets to this bigger picture of there's something to it. There's something to the bad eventually being for good. And there's some really bad stuff, and it gets twisty. I'm not trying to have like that whole conversation can get twisty when there's some things that are just like inherently terrible, and but when putting that aside for the minute, just kind of like in general, the bad stuff that our kids go through, even at school, because for some of us, right, like a lot of people are like, oh yeah, it's school and a million cheerleader pictures. And for some of us, it's not like that. School is a source of pain for our children, and we, I think if you put it in the perspective of a lifelong journey, for anybody listening, like for Kate, right, of how bad some of that was, and she turned into literally the most incredible, wonderful person that I know who is alive. And without that, I know you wouldn't have been the same. You wouldn't have the same compassion. You wouldn't have the same empathy for people who have gone through that. And so maybe everybody just take a little dose of that. If your kid, your child, your son, daughter, person is going through a rough spot and it's dark feeling and you're like, want to stop it. And, there's certain things you got to step in. But other things, it's like just trust that this is part of their story and their journey. It's really not about you. And I think as parents, it feels like it's really about us. Like, oh, my kid's graduating from high school, like it's your event. It's not though. I mean, of course, it's you got a kid through. Whew, that's exciting and stuff. But all of this is their journey and their experience. So maybe back to school, we can be a little more honest that it's not just roses. I mean, there's some kids, but like, look, these kids got it rough. Imagine if we had social media. How many likes? Like that one's like, that little cute, she don't get that many likes. Something that is part of their entire culture. How many likes did you get? Mm-hmm. What if there was an objective, tangible way to measure popularity and in your mind as a child worth? We do it as adults too, but it's worse. By how many likes? Think of what they're going through. And even the most popularest, perfect lookingest cheerleader, football player, student council president, it ain't easy on them. And they're the ones sometimes who you hear those stories and they were going through a whole thing and no one knew. So if that's your kid, and that's your experience, mamas, law mamas out there, mom supporters, dog mamas, people who have moms, you're not alone in it. And I think actually that's the more true story. I know because I see into people's business in my job and things that look super duper, and then behind the curtain it's really complicated and painful. So not in a downer way, but I think like hopefully we can find solidarity in that and encouragement. What we really just want to hear is we're not alone, and we're not alone in it. You're not alone in some of it's difficult, but if we can sort of try to let go of our expectations, number one, that their school journey will be like yours or better than yours or turn out in some certain way. Let go of that expectation, and out the door with it goes disappointment. Mm-hmm. And try to be present and enjoy what is, right? And then I think that the letting go of the resistance is the way to enjoy, and just think of your kids as little co-journeyers on this life path. And you're just trying to help them while you can, but they ain't going to be there for that long. They're going to do their own thing. And don't, that's a whole different thing. Don't lose you. Don't be so consumed with their business at school that you forget to make your life. And then they're 18 and you're like, well, now what?
Well, and if anybody's like, yeah, I'm into this conversation, this is a good moment to talk about our guest next week, Steph Tuss, who is the CEO for David Nagel's company. So David Nagel, if you don't know about David Nagel, he's an incredible entrepreneurial mindset coach. He has a podcast called The Successful Mind. It's a really, really good podcast. And Steph's been with him forever. And she does a lot of stuff that's really remarkable. I mean, Steph is brilliant and does training on managing people and marketing and all this really cool business stuff. But I talked to her recently. Can't remember why we were chatting about something else. I mean, she's like powerhouse woman, all sorts of cool business stuff she could talk to us about. And we started talking about empty nesting because she became an empty nester last year. And she's like, I was not prepared. People don't talk about it. There is so much going on around that time of my mother's life that people don't talk about. And I was thinking, all this is happening to me. And am I alone? And I started Googling stuff. And so I was like, Steph, this is what we need to talk about on the show next week. Because anytime there's like a common motherhood experience that's not often talked about, that's where we want to go. So anyway, that's what we'll be chatting about with Steph.
Well, I'm excited. I think it's going to be great to have that conversation. And again, I bet you her advice, if I was a betting woman, and I kind of am, I guess, would be that she's going to talk about expectations and your expectations for that and preparing for that and letting go of the resistance. Now, Kate, other little segment we're bringing forward for the lounge is what you're reading. So do you want to share a little bit? It's very, very topic time. It doesn't always tie exactly into our topic, but I know your book does for this week.
It does. It happens to tie together, and something tells me that will happen a lot. So I'm reading this book called Free to Learn by a guy named Peter Graham, pulling it up on my phone because I want to read you guys a quote. I'm only in like chapter 2, so I'm by no means an expert on this book, but it is this principle of play. Children learning to play. And this is the end of the chapter where he talks about sort of the history of the school structure. And he says, we rarely stop to think about how new and unnatural all this is in the larger context of human evolution and how it emerged from a bleak period in our history that was marked by child labor and beliefs in children's innate sinfulness. We have forgotten that children are designed by nature to learn through self-directed play and exploration. And so, more and more, we deprive them of freedom to learn, subjecting them instead to the tedious and painfully slow learning methods by those who run the schools. So, I mean, I know a lot of us are, myself included, we're keeping our kids in regular school systems. So this is not like everybody's got to do this new school thing. But I think we do, as a society, disallow our children from freedom of exploration and play, just in terms of like how far down the street they can go by themselves. And some of that is like, we are much more aware as a society about the dangers and the risks out there. We've got online predators, and when something goes wrong with a kid, it's all over. Like, we know everything. And so that some of it is just more knowledge. But apart from the educational piece, I'm just taking this, what I'm taking from this book for my other kid, and what I want to share is just the importance of self-directed play amongst children and freedom to work things out amongst themselves, and to learn the boundaries and the limits of relationships amongst themselves without adult intervention is really valuable. And so I think sometimes we can give ourselves, myself included, a really hard time because we're not always the one playing with the kid, or we're not, all up in their business all the time. And I try and give myself a pass as often as possible. But like, there's actually research out there that the more we can let them be free to play on their own, the more they develop important skills. So that's what's on my mind. How about you, Hannah? What are you reading?
Yeah, so I actually just finished a book last night, very not on this topic, called Reveal by Megan Watterson. And we'll put in the, I don't know, show notes, chat, something, these titles. And this is a very, very different, which I can't help but know we'll be talking a lot about it. This is the same author who does the Red Card Deck, Kate, that you and I know about. And her, it's really, I guess, kind of like a memoir of her spiritual exploration of the divine feminine, whatever exactly that is. And it's pretty woo, and I'm very woo crew these days. But I think my big takeaway from that, to finish that this week, is the power of women coming together in a circle, which I think is what I hope, like our little logo is a circle. And that's what we try to do. If you were all here in front of us, we'd be doing that together. Since the beginning of time, women have been coming together in a circle to connect, to commune, to support. They run to the circle when maybe there are situations at home in the men of their lives or whatever. Our partners don't, aren't that, they don't provide some of that. We know when we have that circle, we can go to them. And just this notion of experiencing spirituality and sexuality and whatever, like in the context of, with the support of other women, and that there's something more than, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts in that way. And really being supportive, and supportive is like not quite the right word, but like being that safe place in which to experience the fullness of who we really are. And that what the world really needs is for women to come alive and to live out loud. And that's sort of our whole concept with this whole thing that we're up to is that. And so for me, just a reminder of, and one thing I've been really considering is living and speaking from your true authentic voice, and not the thing you've adapted and adopted as time's gone on to make you and your experience easier on everyone else. And I think as women, we do that so much. Or sometimes you'll say something and you'll be like, oh, like, where did that come from? It came out of my mouth before I could even say it, right? That's your true voice, more than likely, or your sass voice. I mean, they may be related, but to just really, her book is about tapping into that and the full power of who you really are, and standing in that truth, and being comfortable that may not be comfortable for others. And you know what? Bump them. Bye. I mean, okay. This is the whole spiritual journey is about getting to that true voice or something. So that part now, that book is a woo book. So just in case you're going to go get it, keep that in mind, all right, in case that is not you. So, okay, what we've been reading, Kate, the other thing we wanted to talk about is what's our dominant thought this week? That's a question a friend of mine had asked me. What's your dominant thought? And I love that. So usually each week, by the time we get here, there is one. So do you have one, Kate?
Yeah, I love this question. I do. And we should do this sometime. My dad and my stepmom, they always talk about what's your rose and your thorn? What are your roses and your thorns? Which I think is another cool question. But for me, a dominant thought this week is about bravery, and anxiety and worry, and fear, and how much bravery has to be present in those moments, because I think a lot of our kids are dealing with anxieties. They've just come through a pandemic. A lot of us are dealing with anxieties. And if we're being honest and having a personal development journey where we're opening our eyes and looking at ourselves and growing, we are constantly changing and stepping into the unknown, and leaving the shore for the ocean. And that is scary. And I am just thinking a lot about being afraid does not mean we're not brave. In fact, it's the opposite. And it's okay.
Oh, on the call, Kate, you missed this morning. The word of wisdom was that bravery is fear that said its prayers.
Oh, I love that. Well, there we go. I'm going to have to go back and listen. That's my dominant thought. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I have several, some more sort of deeply personal than others. I was trying to think of which one to share. I think just learning about myself. And Kate, we had done this assessment, which was so interesting about Enneagram, which I'm not trying to like go down a whole entire Enneagram rabbit hole, but that stuff was, I did one because I've done it before, and like whatever it spit out at me, I was like, that is not right. This is dumb. It was probably some free test, but we did one where you paid. And which may not be no shock to all of y'all. Kate and I share, we're both number sevens, which sevens think they're the best.
They do. We did a workshop and she said that. She said, everybody who gets their results, everybody but sevens are like, oh, I don't really like that. But the sevens are always like, yes, I'm a seven.
And what was so helpful, and there's this one assessment we did had some where it analyzed some subparts. Now, how these questions, I don't know, y'all, but it's true. Okay. I don't know how to tell you why it works or whatever. And Kate and I's subparts were different, which is exactly our experience, that we're very similar in like our global approach to things, but then there's some very distinct differences of how we operate in the world. And one of the things that we share in common is not sitting in crap. We don't sit, the sevens don't sit in negative feelings. We use our minds to reorient our approach. We keep moving, move on to the next thing. And we don't sit in pain, in difficulty, in hurt, in grief, in general. We experience that emotion. We would like for it to go away, please, and thank you right now. And the best thing to do is to do something else fun and exciting, or, move on. And I have experienced this week just realizing that about myself, and that's not exact. It's very handy and useful and effective, but it's not. Oh, I just see a hummingbird outside my window right now as we're talking about this. Hummingbird's my firm bird, and also like a sign of life and hope or something, so whatever. And it's useful, but it's not probably the most emotionally healthy, because then if you never experience that hurtful, painful thing, you stuff it. And then it comes up in all these weird, wonky ways later. And I'm not trying to be a therapist or anything, but I had an opportunity this week to realize that, to see someone hurting and in pain about a situation. And I just didn't have any understanding, because I always think of myself as so compassionate and so empathetic and really can get in the shoes of anybody in any situation. And that's mostly true, except when they're sitting in their hurt. Because part of me is like, I mean, do not do that. Let's get going. Let's just make this better. Let's, right now. And so, really recognizing that I don't have the best empathy when people are hurting and in pain and needing to heal and work through that. Because, like, when I was getting divorced, people say you need to take time to heal. And I'm like, I literally, and even to this day, I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean take time to heal? Like, okay, I'm done now. Like, am I healed? Like, what is there a certain amount of days and hours? I mean, we talking a week or like, what do you mean? And so really identifying that hole, and it's not easy for me to admit I lack in an area. That's the 7 of it, right? Because I don't sit in that feeling. So to realize that I do and have, and that I don't find compassion for people who sit in that feeling, that was tough. But I'm so grateful for the lesson, to try to find that compassion and empathy for someone, or people, like, even with my kids when they're going through hard stuff. Because my answer is, oh, well, how can we make it better? Like, let's do this, let's do that. I have solutions, moving on, not just sit in it. And that sucks bad. And I am sorry. And let's just be that way. And we may be that way for an hour, a day, a week. I mean, even saying that, it's going to take some while to permeate to my spirit, because it's just not the way I am. But just because that's not the way I am doesn't mean that's not the way I should be. And I think it's both a positive of our personality types. And I see some comments with our friend Lily relates to this. Lily, who we love, who's going to be on the show before too awful long, that it's a positive, but it has the potential to be a negative. And so I really learned that's my dominant thought. It's like, hey, I don't have empathy in this area, and I don't ever want to say I don't have empathy for people in this situation. I always want to find that put myself in your shoes thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, wow, that's a big one. That's a real big one, Hannah. And I feel like it's okay to allow ourselves to process and move through pain quickly if we really can do that, if we're not stuffing. But this lesson of allowing others to have their speed. And I talked on a recent show, like, one of my words is hasty. Like, I'm like this through life, through everything. And oftentimes I can put that on other people. My mom always talks about, she's like, everybody around you is transition sensitive and you have like zero transition sensitivity, so I'm just like all over the place, and just allowing our people to wallow if they want, to sit in the muck and not rush them through it. That's a lesson that I'm going to be taken to and work
it. Keep learning. It's good that, and I think, not being hard on ourselves because we don't necessarily sit in the negative, but maybe as we go through, and as our girl Lily watching this, like, as we go through something, if we're turning that corner so quickly, being willing to check in with ourselves, to see if we are turning the corner healthily because we've processed it and we are being grown-ups about it, or are we sort of running from that? And being self-aware and honest and do that gut check of ourselves, I think, is the lesson. It makes me kind of feel like I start to feel this tightness in my throat and my chest and my stomach, and like that's when I know I'm at the spot, because it makes me literally want to not have talked about this and like not have named it for the whole entire God's internet, to say, so because I'm going to have to, to own that lesson and do something about it. So, okay, last thing, Kate, we got to hand out our gold stars. It's so funny how life is. We both are having similar gold stars in terms of our, what did we say we were going to do the same on? Kind of our person lawyer one was the same.
Yeah, I guess it's person and lawyer because, and it's also overlapping themes, because right now I'm sitting in a hotel room. I'm in Miami at a workshop, and it might be the least funnest workshop of all time. It's a tax strategy workshop. It's 3 days of talking about taxes. But I have to say, I have been engaged, attentive. I've learned a lot, and I've also not gotten lost. I'm not just like checking out because I can't follow it. At this very moment, I'm missing a discussion about health savings accounts.
Mm.
But so my gold star is like, I'm here. I chose to do this workshop. I'm actually paying attention because it's really tempting to be like, meh, I don't like this. I don't want to know. I'm just going to, hope my CPA knows this stuff. But that's not being a grown up. And so I'm getting a grown up gold star on attending and participating in a tax strategy workshop. How about you?
Yeah, and I think that's your person and lawyer, right? Because you're doing it in the context of the firm.
Yeah.
Um, Mine is also related to taxes. I'm always an extension person, and it is not even October. It is August, and I'm getting my tax stuff together. I know everybody else is like April. I'm like, what's April taxes? Like, I don't even know what you mean. So for me, the crunch is always at the end of September. I'm like, oh, I have to find everything and every login known to man, and just the idea of logins.
Yeah.
I can't. I can't. And I even the computer saves it on the Macs. You just like push a button and it knows, but I don't how somehow it doesn't know anymore, and it's a new one, and it's anyway. So mine has been biting the bullet, getting ahead of the tax stuff. I need to do that for just some business reasons too, to get ahead of because I'm thinking longer term, and I need to get some of this done so some balls can get in motion for stuff that's for 2023 and beyond. So very grown up in that way. We can do a joint mom gold star. I think ours is the same. We're just like on the same
Yeah.
page, Katie.
Enneagram sevens, tax
Yes,
strategy. My
taxes.
kids went back to school.
Back to school is our mom star. We survived.
They're happy. The week's gone well. That's a
Yeah.
gold star, I'll say.
And I think, yeah, if it is if your kids started to school this week or last and y'all are all still standing,
Mhm.
we're going to go ahead and give all of y'all a mom supporter, dog mama gold star. And I love Jen Hatmaker's, I bet you she posts it today or already has, that where she talks about don't plan the back to school crazy blowout on Fridays because all your kids need is a pizza and a couch because they're like completely overwhelmed and overstimulated. So if anybody, y'all look out for Jen Hatmaker. That thing she posts is such sound good advice. So no big parties tonight, moms and dads and everybody. Order pizza, put on a movie, let them get on their phone and just veg the way you would want to veg and just let it roll. I see some yeses and stuff from some of my some people who I know happen to have the bigger kids. We know this because we tried it. Oh, let's all meet up at the burger place on Friday after back to school celebration. No, do not. Everybody go home. Everybody put your feet up. Maybe you could make them a big hot bubble bath if you got those bath bubble things. That's another Jen Hatmaker thing, like the special bath situation. Let them take a bath in your bathtub if you got a big nice bathroom and those what are these called? It's a circle
Bath
thing.
bomb.
Kate? Bath bomb. Okay, we'll do that. Their favorite meal takeout, and let them just go to their room and hang it up. That is my advice for that. So
Well, and
okay.
There's a local parenting coach in town. Her name is Carrie Conti, and Josh and I have been accessing her material for a long time. She talks about for the littles, when we've gotten through something hard like back to school, sometimes they're going to have meltdowns and just like complete lose it all, cry for hours, and it's like their bodies are processing all this stuff that they've gone through. So that's another thing for the parents of littles is, if a meltdown happens, it's okay. It's just a lot of emotions that need to find their way out.
Yeah, it doesn't mean everything's crap, right? And keep that in mind, mom. Like one bad fit, one bad day, one bad weekend doesn't mean they're not doing fine. It's just the human experience, and we're all in it together. I tell you what, Kate, I sort of really love Law Mom's Lounge.
I do too. I'm having fun.
I know, it's way fun. It's like, hey, let's just catch up on this stuff. So if anybody watching has any thoughts on things that might be fun for us to talk about on our Law Mom's Lounge, just like weird, sticky topics that's just me and Kate, and we are not experts in basically anything. But we can just kind of talk about, we're willing to go there in some of the tougher conversations and just try to, if nothing else, give people a place to say, you know what, me too. I'm glad I'm not alone. And you're not alone because we're all together in it. And I just am so grateful for everybody who's tuned in and all of our teams who help make this whole little thing possible. I know it may even be a little surprise. There's like a lot that goes into it. And it is just the most fun to do this with you, Kate. I look forward to it all week now that we do it every Friday, and so love the way we're seeing people say that it's impacting them, that they're enjoying it. Really encouraging and appreciative of that, and thank y'all for adding to the whole experience. So I hope everybody has really great weekend. Kate, come home from Miami.
Oh man, I'll be home soon. We get to reunite.
Yes.
Bye, guys.
Bye.